So do I just say it to the camera? Hi, I'm Paul. I'm in the Vancouver area, but I'm actually English, and I'm looking for adventure. I spend most of my time making videos on the internet and writing, and I like to cook risotto, get punched, and look at animals. The type of adventure I'm looking for is, I guess, something independent and with lots of travel, and maybe involving an animal like a dog or a cat, or maybe a platypus. That's... oh, huh? Looks like I've got a match. Sometimes a game comes out that surprises you. It blows you out of the water with its exuberance and its excellence. Sometimes a game comes out that you knew was going to be bad and you saw it coming being bad, and then it arrives and it's bad and you feel kind of quite justified. And then sometimes you cannot wait for a game to come out and you're excited about that game, and that is the case for me with Near and Far, which I was really pumped to try more than a year ago now when I first saw it announced on Kickstarter. As you might know, Sharp and Sit-Down very rarely reviews Kickstarter titles because it's kind of pointless. The whole model of Kickstarter means that all of those copies of that game have already been pre-bought before the game is actually released in its final form, making reviews wonderfully irrelevant. However, more and more Kickstarter titles like Near and Far are getting reprints or distribution deals or general release, which is great for everybody, because if it turns out when those games come out they're rather good, then more of us can enjoy them. I'm just making a mess. Near and Far is of particular interest to me because I've been following its creator, Ryan Laukat, if I'm saying that rightly, for a while now, and I've really enjoyed two of his previous games. He's one of those rare breeds of people who's both good at game design and good at game art, doing both of them very capably. And on our site you can read written reviews of 8 Minute Empire and Above and Below, both of which we're quite effusive about, and the latter of which is the predecessor of this, so you can understand how this has piqued my interest. And right out of the box, I am immediately excited about all of the potential here. First of all, like Seafall and Pandemic Legacy, Near and Far is a game that actually has a campaign that runs through it, something you will play across multiple sessions if you want to, because it doesn't demand the same level of commitment. It's not as big a deal in this game as it is in those peers. It's more of a light dusting on top of something that you can actually play as a whole bunch of standalone sessions if you like, because this board, look at what's this? This isn't a board, this is actually a book of a whole bunch of different maps that you could play instead if you wish to, and hidden just out of shot is this whole book full of hundreds and hundreds of quest encounters and vignettes just waiting to be encountered and vignetted and discovered and explored as you trawl your way across all of this. There is a lot to find here, and you won't find it all quickly. And everything is pretty as well, awash with this wistful, wonderful, sort of warm-hearted vision of the world that Laukat has. All these wonderful different adventurers waiting to go and have wonderful different adventures, but adventures that are never too dangerous either. And while you will encounter things from bandits to gigantic underground tunnel complexes to huge robots, nothing will ever get too nasty. However you're playing, whether it's a standalone adventure or if you're continuing a campaign, and by the way, I'm going to keep this review very low spoiler, you will always start the same way, which is in a town roughly at the centre of the map, where you are rushing about gathering supplies for your journey, trying not to bump into one another, because this is a kind of a rudimentary worker placement game. You might be trying to grab a pack animal to put treasures on, or you might be headed over to the saloon to recruit more adventurers that make you better at everything, exploring, fighting, challenges. You might just want some food from the farm, whatever you want. Apart from the saloon, each space can only take one person at a time. It's first come, first served. A sort of constant race or merry-go-round or carousel of trying to grab what you want so you can get out the front door, get out the front gate as soon as possible. However, if you do find a spot is occupied and you really, really want what's there, you can be kind of a jerk about things. So here's the first of several slightly odd rules in the game. If you really, really want to be somewhere where somebody else is, you can duel them for that spot, which is basically some opposed die rolls and adding your combat values. If you also want to fight dirty, which will lower your reputation, you get another bonus. And if you have any spare stamina hearts left, you can further boost your die roll. If you succeed, you won the duel, which means you just get to be in the shop with them. Well done. If you lose, you're a bad person. You go to prison for dueling, and then next turn when you come out, you can go wherever you like, including a spot that's already occupied. So it's basically a mechanic that's like, do you want to risk rolling a die to be delayed for a turn to get to do what you want immediately, rather than go somewhere and not kick up a ruckus? I could have explained that more concisely. Look, the thing I'm trying to explain is it's the very undramatic duel, possibly the least undramatic duel in history, because the other player, by the way, just does nothing. If they beat you, nothing happens. If you beat them and you're now in the shop with them, nothing happens. As well as racing about town, you are also racing to just get out there in the world and stick pins into the map. It's very, very tempting to think, oh, I could spend another turn in town, I could grab another party member again, or now that I have a really skillful party, I can go back to the farm and get even more food. But that's treacherous, because someone else is inevitably already rushing out the front gates, and even if they don't seem as prepared as you, they're in the world and they're claiming things. The world is seeded with these one-time story tokens, these unique encounters that only one of you will ever experience when you go to that place. It's also full of coins and gems. There are bandits hiding around corners waiting to fight you. There's trade routes that you can set up. And as you move through the world, just like you do when you're camping, you poop out little tents behind you to claim spots. And once a spot's claimed, that's it, that's done. That belongs to that person forever. Dropping, emitting, ejecting, releasing tents is always a good idea. You drop tents on bandit cards whenever you have defeated someone. You claim that, you keep that. You drop them in town whenever you mine resources, more on that in a moment. And as I say, you drop them on this map, claiming your territory and scoring points for these. In addition, when they come off your player board, they sometimes reveal an extra secret bonus, and the person who uses all of their tents first ends the game, but also almost inevitably tends to win the game too. So I keep talking about resources, right? How you are constantly dredging them up as you move from space to space across the map, how you dive into this town mine and you get more gems and more gold. And that's cool, right? I mean, you need gold to hire adventurers, and surplus resources are worth points at the end of the game, but that's not really the point of them. And so here's another rather unusual thing about Near and Far. You start the game drafting all of these cards between each other, and they are all unique items that do a special thing. They're all exciting and sexy and one of a kind, and I like all of them, but none of them work when you start with them. They are all nothing more than dead weight, and in order to activate them, as you probably guessed, you have to pay the price along the side, and then they're worth however many points they are worth at the end of the game. If not, they're actually a victory point penalty. These are 10 a penny in town, and you can just grab handfuls of them, but until you can pay the price to get them working, they are inert and they are just penalizing you. And so here's the other thing, they're all useful, I like that they exist, but they are actually not as victory point efficient as just constantly pitching tents as fast as possible. You want these because they're cooler, but you should just be doing these because it's faster. Speaking of white elephant type things, there's also the game's treasure cards, which you can sometimes acquire on your travels, but they're also given out like candy in town, and like candy, they're not necessarily very good for you. First of all, they require a pack animal for you to carry them, which is already an investment of some resources and time. And then second, when you get them, they're not actually necessarily very useful. There's all kinds of different things you can find, but they're kind of context specific. And if they don't help you, they just don't help you, and they aren't exciting and they aren't worth getting, and they're probably like the least dramatic element of the game. And if treasure should be anything, it should be dramatic and exciting, right? And I haven't even got to the adventure book yet, all of the encounters in the game. And so here's the rub. Here's the rubbiest of rubs. Here's the rubbiest rub in all of review rubbing ever. Yeah, there's loads of stuff in here. The encounters they're great. All right, they're frequently like good. Some are better written than others. Some are more interesting than others, but there are recurring characters that reappear. There are keywords that you become associated with whereby you do something and then a later event pops up again that might be relevant just to you. There are side quests. There are your character's own personal quests. There are all sorts of things to be found, from cave complexes to weird fields of meteors to strange characters, and it's cool. It's great. I love that it's there. Most of it boils down to making pretty simple choices, though. A lot of it is skill or combat checks that are just a die roll that you add your party values to, and then if you fail, you can just sort of burn your heart tokens to succeed anyway, which is kind of anticlimactic, and then you come away with probably a few more resources, or one of those treasures that you might not be able to fit on your pack bird because it already has another treasure, or just something that's not very helpful. I thought adventures were going to be like the beating heart of this enormous, exciting beast, whereas instead they're kind of the docked, wagging tail of a small dog. I really like them. I'm glad that they're here. I think it's really entertaining to read these out to each other and to see what happens, but they're not relevant to actually being a successful adventurer. All of this means that your life is much less about assembling an eclectic party or finding life-changing treasures or having exciting encounters in the middle of the wilderness than it is just about accurately managing your energy levels and trying to make sure that you don't get too tired and then that you do go home when you're sleepy. And you're doing all of this rushing past one another, exchanging jealous glances and angrily coveting the things that other people have already claimed, because there's very few ways you can actually affect what anybody else does. There's very little interaction, and as you read more and more paragraphs from this book, you start to realize this reading to one another, that's actually really the only thing you're doing together. Though I started to find it more mechanical than magical, though I don't think it's good enough to get our seal of approval, I still enjoyed this a lot. I still thought it was a good game, and clearly I still wanted to make a video about it. It's still charming, it still looks gorgeous, and I really appreciate the fact that it has so much in it, that it has its campaign mode, that it has an arcade way of playing that won't actually spoil anything in the book, that it has so many different things to be discovered, and that it will still find times where it makes you laugh or it makes you feel joyous, or where you share a moment with your friends that is kind of spectacular and silly. I've had a really good time with Near and Far, but I'm also ready to move on to something else, and it will never hold much more than a small space in my heart. We did have a good time together, and nevertheless it has a lot of love to give. It may be the game for you, but if you're also not convinced, don't worry, you can find many more wonderful board games on our board game dating website, shutupandsitdown.com. Many games just waiting for a loving home, waiting for the right person to appreciate what they have to offer.